Dr. Elie Diner, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, same. We've actually already had a bit of an informal discussion at one point. I saw your account on Twitter and I was like, hey, can we talk? Just randomly. Hi.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love getting messages like that because it gives me an excuse to talk about what I'm passionate about, and most of the time people are happy to listen. So yeah, you gave me a
Yeah,
captive audience.
it is very interesting because we are kind of in the same field. I've gone from the software world to marketing, but we take it from different angles, you know. So I wanted to
Hmm.
bring you on the show to talk about that. So let's just tell people a little bit about who you are. You are a former scientist turned science marketer. That's
Hmm.
unique, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's becoming more common as I think a lot of scientists are looking for or getting kind of sick of being at the bench or tired of the lifestyle that scientific research kind of brings. So they're looking for alternative careers or things they can do with their science background. So yeah, science marketing is kind of up there, and I would say I would kind of pull the lens back a little bit and just say science communication as a whole. I think a lot of scientists are kind of moving in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I focused heavily on science marketer or science marketing is only because that part is quite new. Science communication, I
Hmm.
think, is gaining ground. I think scientists are still hesitant to consider marketing. Do you find that it's a bit of a dirty word in the science field?
It definitely is. I think marketing, like, all of a sudden it turns people's stomach maybe a little bit. They hear that term, and then if you really want to turn their stomach, you mention branding, and they people run for the hills, especially scientists. Um, I like to, like, I think you can really distill like good marketing and good branding down to storytelling, and that's kind of like what I like to use as an alternative. It really is just kind of like trying to tell a story about your science, which sometimes scientists will still react to, but I think it is a little less dramatic than saying marketing or branding. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so before we get into really the full depth of what marketing is and what you do, I want to
Hmm.
kind of tell people what your background is. You have a PhD. So tell me a little bit about what you used to do as a scientist.
Yeah, sure. I grew up around science. My dad was a scientist. He worked at DuPont for forever. So I was always like really he was always happy to talk about science, and I was always happy to listen. And so I grew up around science, and it's kind of the family business almost in a way. And so I went to college, and I did a little exploring, and was still just kind of found science really really cool. And so eventually I found my way into a lab, a molecular biology lab, and fell in love with being at the bench and running experiments. And so that brought me to graduate school, where I found microbiology, and so I studied E. coli as a graduate student, and I studied a cool system that bacteria use to sort of fight each other in their little niche environments. So it was a really cool topic to study. Um, and then, as you do in academia, I went on to do a postdoc, and I did a postdoc in immunology for a little bit, and then in synthetic biology for a little bit. So I really bounced around. I could never really focus in science. There's just like so much cool stuff, and I just wanted to do it all. um, and in research, in academic research especially, you really do have to kind of like focus, find a niche, and just like stay in it. I think there are some exceptions to that. People can kind of like venture outside their niche or try different things, but I think to have a successful academic career, a lot of people just really focusing on a niche, and I could never do that. um yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I
At what point did you actually decide I'm done? I'm just done.
Yeah, man, I can't whittle it down to one moment, it was probably a series of moments over my 10 years in research. But yeah, I always really went pretty like hard into my work. I think working 12-hour days and 7 days a week, and I always was really engrossed in my research. And I think it, and at the beginning, I just loved it. I loved it so much, and I like didn't want to do anything else aside from just be in lab and run experiments. And I think that lifestyle just kind of caught up with me. I think, as with a lot of academics, I just got burnt out. And at the same time, I started to, think about wanting a family and having kids, and those other things started to kind of occupy more space in my life. And I couldn't see how, being in lab 12 hours a day, 7 days a week could fit into that lifestyle. And so ultimately, I kind of chose to look for something else. Yeah.
Okay. And what was it the lifestyle of marketing that you wanted? Was it the job itself? What was it about marketing specifically that really made you lean into that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always liked, I don't think I'd ever like heard of marketing when I was in academic science. I think your interaction with marketing is like so minimal. You get kind of like pushy sales reps who like stop by the lab and are like, "Hey, want to try this new like DNA extraction kit?" And I'm like, "No, no, I really don't." And so I was always like, I like most academics just thought like sales and marketing was like stuff I didn't have to pay attention to. Were an annoyance. So I always really liked communicating about science. And I liked giving presentations about science. I liked writing papers. I liked all of that kind of communication stuff. And so I started blogging a little bit. I started writing articles for like kind of a broader audience, an audience, outside of hardcore science and scientists. And I found I really enjoyed it. And so I started looking for, as I kind of accepted that, I was going to leave science, I was going to leave research. I started just kind of exploring, talking to old colleagues, talking to people who did science communication, and just kind of picking their brain about like what their day to day life is like, what they like about their job, what they hate about their job. Um, and so ultimately I kind of you know got the feeling that communication, or a career in communication, was for me. And so I took a job as initially as a medical writer, which is basically, it's code for it's code for marketing in the pharmaceutical industry, really. So what I did was I put PowerPoint slides together for doctors to go out and market drugs or raise awareness about specific diseases to their other, to their colleagues or to various audiences. And so that was sort of my first step out of the lab, into a marketing role, and it really relied pretty heavily on the skills that I had like built as a scientist. Presenting about research, talking about certain diseases, and so I used those skills pretty heavily in that first medical writing job. Yeah.
Right. And now you're full on marketing essentially.
Yeah, and yeah, so then I kind of what I learned about medical writing is medical writing falls into this class of marketing which is called outbound marketing, where someone goes out and like you know takes a megaphone and screams their message to people. um, and that's one form of marketing. You can think about billboards, or that's sort of your classic example of outbound marketing. I sort of moved into the more like what's now called inbound marketing, where you can kind of attract your audience, attract people to your website, or a piece of content that you wrote. That's sort of the marketing that I moved into, and what I do now as a freelance marketer.
Now, I'm in Canada. Whereabouts are you in the US again?
I'm in San Diego.
San Diego, California. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because one of the things I've noticed is a major I mean, there's always been a major cultural difference in terms of, people getting into industries earlier, and Americans are always first at everything pretty much. But especially science communication, I find it's much more popular in the United States. It's growing in Canada, but I think in Canada, they're still at the stage of communication. They're not at the stage of things like marketing, bringing an audience to them,
Mm-hmm.
or using SEO or things like that. So do you find that you have I don't know if your clients are international, so let me ask you that question first. Are most of your clients American as well?
Yeah, most of my clients are American. When I before I went out on my own, I did work with a few clients that are kind of international. I would say their biggest markets are in the U.S., but they sell all over the world. They're big kind of global brands that I think most scientists might recognize. Yeah,
Okay, because one of the arguments I hear, especially internationally, is that science shouldn't be sold, it shouldn't be marketed, it should be discovered. What would be your argument, either for or against that?
yeah. I think regardless of what you do as a career, you're trying to persuade someone to your way of thinking. Um, and I think really like what marketing tries to do is persuade. So if I'm a scientist and I'm going out and talking about my research, I'm presenting data, I'm using data to ultimately persuade my audience to believe what I've come to believe, what I've found studying and running experiments on this one topic. So I would say scientists uh, are ultimately trying to persuade, and I think storytelling and marketing is just it's another version of that. It's probably maybe a more direct version of doing that than like a scientist giving a presentation or writing a paper, but it's still ultimately working towards the same goal. Yeah,
And so your business is called Word Lab,
it is.
WERD, Word. It's very kind of cool, hip
Yeah.
approach to naming a business. I like it.
Thank you.
You've got to be fun at the same time. It's one thing to do marketing and writing, and especially in your field because you're doing a lot of what you do. I find probably plays to your strengths. You do a
Mhm.
lot of writing, a lot of writing, a lot of blogging, a lot of data SEO, things like that. Is that because, you know, um, that's something you find that you're very good at and that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, and just just a note on the name. Actually, Word Lab is the first the each letter in a word is the first letter of each member of my family. So Wiley, who's my son, is the W. Ella is my daughter, is the E, and then R. Rachel is my wife, and then D for Diner. So just a nice little aside there.
That's really cute.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, sorry, I forgot your original question.
Well, I was just curious because, marketers tend to play through their strengths, like good marketers.
Mhm,
And so for you, it seems to be writing, data, and SEO. And I was
mhm.
just curious if that was something that you did for a competitive edge or if it's something that you just feel really good at doing and
Yeah.
that you enjoy it.
Yeah, so the writing I just enjoy, and I like, I talked about my kind of, inability to focus on one research topic, and I find writing, for all of these different brands and all of these different science companies allows me to kind of like jump around to different topics and kind of dive into a scientific area that maybe I'm not as familiar with or that I've always been curious about. And it allows me to do it in like shorter time frames than scientific research operates on. So that is a real passion of mine. And then I think the SEO part of it, which for anyone who doesn't know stands for search engine optimization. SEO allows me to kind of dig into some more of that data. I think you kind of touched on that. Yeah, it allows me to look at data, be analytical, which is one of the things I kind of miss about not being a scientist anymore. And there's a lot of tools out there that you can use, a lot of tools and techniques, and a lot of, just people writing about it. So it does allow you to kind of take that kind of analytical mind that I used as a scientist and apply it to something else. Yeah.
Okay, so if one of your clients asked you to create a video, would you do it or would you just say, "You know what? It's not my forte?"
I would. Yeah, I'm the first to admit, like, when I'm not good at, at something. I have a big problem, like, faking it, faking like I'm an expert in something. So yeah, video is something that's I've always been really like interested in, but I've been intimidated by. So I would love to learn video, but if someone came to me and asked me for a video, I would say, I'm not your guy, but I can help you find someone who could do video or like podcasting, for instance. There are a couple of people I know in the life science industry who specialize in helping brands start up podcasts. And so that's the person I'm thinking of has found their niche. It's something that plays to their strengths. But yeah, I have my own specialty, and I try to stay in my lane. But maybe in the future I'll learn how to do video. That would be cool.
I have to say as a podcaster, trust me, this is not for everyone. It's not easy at all.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, who are your main clients? Are they, organization? Are they businesses? Are they individuals? Or is it a mix?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, most of the, being out on my own for the past month, I've kind of targeted the startup area. Because I think, they have pretty limited budgets and they work on like a fast timeline, and I'm kind of like right in their wheelhouse in terms of like price and, how quickly I can get things done. I also just like working with startups. I think they're pretty, informal and maybe a little more fun than like the bigger companies who like have to stick to their brand and stick to their messaging. They're kind of like figuring it out as they go, and owning my own business, I can kind of relate to that. So I like working with startups, but I've worked with I still kind of work with some bigger brands. Just I have some contacts there, and they know me personally, and so I have those connections, and I've used them as a freelancer now. Trying to think, yeah, and I think I'm still trying to get build up a client base, and so I'm really open to anything. I think academia is something that I I came up in, and so I think there's a lot that could be done in the academic market, to use that dirty word. I think academics especially could really benefit from a little bit of marketing training themselves, a little bit of SEO, a little bit of just I think really the messaging. I think academia could really do with like being able to distill everything that a researcher or scientist does down to like a core message. I think they could really benefit from that.
Yeah, let's talk about messaging for a minute here. I do also want to about SEO, but yeah, I think you
Hmm.
opened a can of worms here that I actually want to pursue, which is
Cool.
messaging, which is that I find academia is getting better at communicating within. I
Hmm.
think that scientists are getting better at explaining things to each other. I find that there's a lot of room to improve in communicating with the public.
Hmm.
Is that something that you've done in marketing? Have you created campaigns to communicate science to the public, or has it mostly been business to business?
Yeah, it's mostly business to business, but I personally like communicating to like kind of a non-expert audience. It's There's a lot more kind of creativity there. Figuring out cute metaphors to use, or just kind of de-jargonize things and put it in terms that a non-expert audience can understand. And I think some brands actually are interested in that as well. Just as more of a they may not be their direct audience, but more of an act of kind of good faith and kind of showing that they're interested in the broader population, not just people who will buy things. So I think that's it's part marketing tactic, but part I think good for good sake. Yeah.
Right. Can
Yeah.
you think of an organization? Because I was thinking the other day, and I can't come up with any ideas. The only person I can think of is what's his name, the magician, Randy. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Oh
The
no, I
amazing
don't.
Randy, who became a skeptic. So somebody who would go on
Hmm.
stage and take like 100 sleeping pills created by homeopathic company and talk about kind of
Wow.
the woo science. I'll post a link, but he used to be a magician, the amazing Randy. He recently
Hmm.
passed away. There's a documentary on him on Netflix. But essentially, what I'm looking to find out is whether or not there's either a marketing company or an organization whose mission is to tackle misinformation in
Mm.
science. Because I think that's one of the key things in scicomm, science communication, or science marketing that hasn't really been hit properly yet. Like anti vax propaganda is
Yeah.
well funded, well marketed,
Hmm.
uh, and consumers aren't stupid. That's not why they don't believe in vaccines. It's because they're being marketed to. Do
Yeah.
you find that is there a science equivalent to that?
Not that I found. I think that's an uphill battle for a lot of brands. And I'm thinking about GMOs, for instance. There's been a lot of misinformation about GMOs, and that ultimately that's hurt a lot of industries. I think about like the agriculture industry. Yeah, agriculture industry, a lot of other industries. I think it does really come down to marketing, and as you did point out, the anti-vax movement, the anti-GMO movement has some great storytellers, and I think there's they can tell kind of these anecdotal stories where families have been injured by having a vaccine, and that really connects to people's fears about what might happen to their own family members or their own children, um, and there just hasn't been robust storytelling that brands have put out there to combat that. And so the absence of that, I think, has really led to the spread of the anti-vax and the anti-GMO movement's message, um, much to the detriment of these companies, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really great point, is that the lack of storytelling. Because we
Hmm.
get a lot of people who can actually simplify things. They create really cool infographics about how vaccines work, what goes into them, why you should wear a mask, but we don't have storytelling. I mean,
Yeah.
I love a good story, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And it really connects. I think there's something just innate about humans that kind of the story, like it just kind of activates your brain a little bit. And so I think just more of that is needed in the science community. The problem is and this was true for me as well. Stories are hard. I was given that advice a lot as a graduate student. When you go out and you give a presentation about your science, tell a story. And it's like such an easy throwaway line, but it's like, well, I don't. How do you do that? I don't know what goes into a story. I'm a scientist. I didn't take literature classes, or I didn't like. No one ever laid this out for me, and so it was really hard to learn. And I'll plug a book that really changed my view of that. It's a book called Houston, We Have a Narrative, by a former scientist. His name is Randy Olson. He was a kind of tenured professor for a long time, I think in New Hampshire, and he left his tenured position to become a filmmaker. Actually, really, he's got a really cool story. And he ended up going to film school after he left science. And in film school, he kind of learned the basics of storytelling. And he's taken that now and distilled it down to like a very simple kind of like storytelling framework, which he lays out in Houston We Have a Narrative. And it's just, for me, it was really that aha moment. It's like, okay, here's this like structure that I can kind of follow and think about and refine and work on, to tell a story, essentially. Yeah,
That's, I'm definitely gonna pick up that book. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, we've had a lot of good science movies, that we've had, like, some cool films, in that kinda explain, some parts of science, but I think you're right. I think storytelling is a big one that we haven't considered. I'm still sitting on that topic only because it's a very fascinating insight. How do you these days, now that you have all this information, now that you've read that book and you've had your aha moment, how do you come up with a story now?
Yeah, I um I like to follow the framework in that book, and I can like lay out the basics of it, just for your listeners. It's kind of this structure where it's this and there's like an and. So he has this very nice. He's named this ABT structure for storytelling, and it stands for and, but, and therefore. So you kind of, to pull back on the framework a little bit, it's like you introduce some facts that your audience is kind of like familiar with or knows something about. Then you introduce there's this but statement. So, but then you introduce kind of a contradiction to those facts. Um, and then you say, therefore, okay, now that we have this contradiction, therefore, here's something that you need to do, or an action that you need to take, or how to kind of proceed in your daily life. And I think that structure can be applied to like, you could fit that into a sentence. So you could kind of tell a story with a sentence, but it can also, that same sort of structure can be applied to like longer form content, like, a blog or a white paper or an ebook or something of that nature. So I really like to think about that when I'm doing, messaging or branding work, or just thinking about writing a blog. I think about that like, okay, I've introduced the facts. Do I have a but there? Do I have kind of conclusion, like how to proceed, a kind of therefore statement? And so I really look for those elements when I'm writing. Sometimes it's very conscious. I think you have to be kind of conscious of that when you're doing like short form content or thinking about messaging. But in the longer form content, it's more of a like kind of subconscious thought about that structure. And then I'll kind of review and kind of like make sure I have the but and the therefore kind of in there. Uh, yeah.
And I'm sure that you also review it just to make sure that it's a good read, right? I mean, a lot of people, they'll do things, they'll optimize for keywords and like they'll
Hmm.
do proper formats and but they don't make it enjoyable as a read.
No, that's a really unfortunate thing, that I think is starting to change, especially in the SEO world. SEO used to be very much like Google would look at content as like almost like an accountant, where it's like, okay, someone, how many times can you mention, like single cell genomics in here, and whoever mentions it the most, we're going to serve them as number one. Google has really taken into account, what people enjoy now. So things that are engaging for users, things that are someone who scrolls down to the bottom of an article. Google values that information, and the more signals you can that Google can look at that says, someone's engaging with this content, someone's reading it, spending more time on this page, the better. And Google uses that information to ultimately inform its rankings of certain content.
Yeah, so let's actually dig into SEO because that's something that, again, is very, very, and I'm sure you would agree, underutilized in science.
Yeah.
It's the optimization for search engines. So, meaning that you're easy to find. So, if you're a science communicator or if you have a project on outer space and you want people to find it, you've got to optimize it so that, people can search for you by typing cool stuff about outer space in Google, or
That's right.
how do I find Pluto, or is Pluto still a planet, or whatever. You want your website to be on the first few pages of Google, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, just when I first started experimenting with SEO, I like built my own blog, and that was kind of my that was my training ground for SEO. Um, and it's incredible, that number one spot on Google's on the first page of like Google search results is like it's like magic. For me, that was like a big aha moment because I started this blog and I was doing writing, and as the months kind of crept by, I started to like show up in number one positions, number two positions, and people started reaching out because people would click through to the blog, they would read the article, and I have a little contact form there, and they'd send me a message. And as like the messages started to pour in, I was like, that was another aha moment for me. I was like, wow, these positions are like really valuable. People make having that number one position makes people assume that you are an expert, you are a leader in the space. um, sometimes like we talked about with the anti-vax movement, they're spreading disinformation or misinformation, unfortunately. But if you are an expert in the space, you want that number one spot, because not only are people going to assume that you're an expert, if you can deliver on that expertise, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine if we concentrated so hard on being in the top 10 pages for things like, "Are vaccines safe?" I think that'd be awesome. It would be like, "Yeah, we won," but it's gonna
Absolutely.
be a constant struggle, and I think a lot of it is gonna come down to funding, money.
Hmm.
I think people, when I speak to, potential clients, and they get so discouraged because they learn that their competitors are paying $50,000 a month for SEO optimization, and they
Yeah.
think they can't be in the game. So I'm sure you've had that kind of conversation with some of your clients. Maybe you haven't, but I'm sure it's going to be coming in the future, which is,
Hmm.
how do you convince them that it's still worth playing the game if they don't have a huge budget?
Yeah, yes, I've gotten that question quite a bit. I think what I like to do, especially coming from academia, is just try to educate them as much as possible. And so what I've been doing is I've been doing these kind of like free Q&A, like SEO sessions, because I think there's a big gap in knowledge about SEO and how to kind of apply it to your marketing. So I've been doing small groups or one-on-one sessions where I just like kind of demo one of the tools I use. And really, and it's free. I kind of enjoy it. It gives me an excuse to talk to people. It gives me an excuse to meet new people. Um, and it arms people with the knowledge that to go out and apply this tool or this new SEO knowledge to their own marketing. Um, so that's kind of one avenue. The other is, a lot of these tools, there are a lot of free versions of these tools, keyword research tools, that you can use to kind of find out what keywords you should optimize content for. And so I think there are ways to kind of do this on a budget. It's just a matter of kind of like going out there and exploring, for yourself. And one of the great things about SEO is there's so much content out there that you can do to, or that you can read to kind of educate yourself. And so I think if you take the time, if you take an hour a week or 2 hours a week to kind of like explore and do some searching, you can really learn a lot. And I think it all comes down to the curiosity about it. For me, I wanted to start a blog for a long time, and I was just like, well, I want people to see my blog. So I went to Google like everyone does and said, how do I attract more traffic to my website? And one of the first articles that came up was about SEO, and I was like, what is this SEO? And I just kind of dug in and started learning, and that kind of sent me on this journey. um, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's for me, it's become a massive obsession. I do SEO research for like 4 hours every single night. It
Yeah.
doesn't stop on weekends, it's every single night. When my partner goes to bed, I am on my phone.
Yeah.
I'm laying down on
Yeah.
the sofa watching Mad Men, not really watching it and just, researching SEO. I find it, like you said, it appeals a lot to people who love data and who love a good challenge, but also have a good gut instinct because to compete with the companies that are paying 50 grand a month, you have to use keywords that are perhaps not often used. And you have to have a
Mhm.
good sense to know what keywords to optimize for so that, you might not rank on the first page for the word Pluto for an outer
Yeah.
space website, but you might rank on the first page for is there water on Pluto? You
Mhm.
know? So there's
Yep.
certain things I think that people don't who don't understand SEO don't necessarily know about that
Yep.
they can still play in the game. They can use,
Yep.
what they call long tail keywords. Do you want to explain that a little bit to our listeners?
Yeah. Yeah, long tail keywords are like a fancy way of saying, a string of, 3 or 4 words together. And I think the what you touched on is a great point. That's where you can really, even as a small brand, you can really compete, and get to those kind of number one, number two, number three positions. And what's great about those long tail keywords is, there's intent behind that. What your example that you gave, is there water on Pluto? That's someone who's like deep into Pluto. There's like they want to know the details of Pluto. They don't want to know like, what are the 12 planets? They want to know like all about Pluto. They want that deep information. So I think there are similar examples, in science as well. I've talked to companies before where it's like they want to rank for DNA. And it's like,
Oof.
think about run through the mind of someone who's searching for DNA. What do they want? It could, like, who is the person behind the computer searching DNA? So it could be like any number of things. It could be like a middle schooler who's writing a science report on DNA. It could be, your grandmother who wants to know more about DNA. But the intent behind someone who's searching DNA is really difficult to pin down. Um, and so people see, to get back to the data kind of part of SEO, a lot of these tools can give you, monthly search volumes for terms like DNA. And so people will see, oh, well, there's, 1 million people searching a month for DNA. I want that audience to come to my website. Well, it's like, but if they're not interested in your they're not interested in the product you're selling, they're not interested in the service that you're providing. They just want information about DNA. They don't really care, and they may not, a middle schooler may not have the money to pay for your product or service. So it's really, I think, a lot of the long tail keyword kind of really makes you reflect and get to the core of like who your audience is, and then from there kind of figuring out what are they searching for, what are the topics that they're interested in, and then providing that content to them.
Okay, and how do you you because again you brought up something really brilliant, which is the target audience. I find that a lot of scientists forget about their target audience, or they don't have one in place.
Yeah.
A lot of it, especially on social media, tends to just go out to their colleagues, but it doesn't reach the people they're trying to reach. As I said
Hmm.
earlier, how do you um, how do you inform your clients about their target audience? Do you help them find it, or do you expect your clients to provide you with that information?
Yeah, I sort of expect them to supply me with that information, but it's often a question that they may not have thought about. So sometimes part of it is just like kind of being a mirror to them and saying like, well, who's your target audience? And then they go, hmm. And then, through the course of conversation, you kind of like drill down on that a little bit more. And, I think some of the projects that have been really successful, for both me and clients I've worked with is, when you can talk to the scientists who are kind of in the lab doing R&D, or talking to, some other internal people, not only the marketing people but other people who, like salespeople for instance, who go out and are actually talking to the customer. they have phenomenal insights sometimes. And they can often, really like crack open projects or really get you to the core of like what a customer cares about, what topics they care about, what they know, what they don't know. That's really like at the heart of a good marketing campaign. Understanding, really getting that deep understanding of your customer.
Right. Do you sometimes have clients that don't take your advice at all? They say, "Okay, okay," and then they just run and do their own thing. Does that happen sometimes?
Yeah, it happens. It happens quite a bit. So, and it's unfortunate, but um, that's at the end of the day. It's it's their money and it's their brand, and ultimately, I can be there as a consultant or as someone who has experience. But if they want to do what they want to do, well, then that's their choice. I run into this a lot with. I've worked on like a couple of landing page projects. So like a landing page is, it can be something that's very focused on achieving like a single goal. So you think about like your whole website and you want people to like land on your homepage and explore your services and your products, maybe check out your blog, like do a bunch of things. Whereas like a landing page is like the exact opposite. It's like you want someone to go there and fill out a form or buy a product or whatever. And usually some of these brands will put together campaigns where they're running ads somewhere, or they're doing paid search ads on Google, and someone's going to click on that ad and they're going to hit this landing page, and the goal is to get them to buy something or fill out a form or learn more or whatever. But so that requires a lot of restraint, like creating this landing page where it's like you want to funnel people into this one action. So you need like minimal copy on the page, a core message like in big font as the first thing they see, a contact us button like right there for someone to click, and maybe a little additional information if someone's not ready to click yet. So as they scroll down, they can get more information. But people, the thing that makes people really uncomfortable is like not having their like website's main menu navigation in like the top right hand corner or like somewhere up there. And that gives a user, the perfect escape route. It's like, okay, well, I'm not ready to contact us, so I'm going to click this menu and get out of here. And so it's sometimes that's like a little frustrating when, I recommend that, you just have, a funnel to get people to do this one action. And they're like, yeah, but we need our main menu nav up there too.
Yeah,
It's just an
habits and
example. Yeah.
traditions can be a pain. It can be
Yeah.
a real pain because I think people are used to seeing something. I always tell people that you have to go with your core strengths as a client. Like if you're an artist, because my goal is to service artists and scientists, just like this podcast. That's
Hmm.
my feet in two worlds, so might as well go with
Yeah.
it. But I always tell, especially artists, you're an artist. You're an artist. If you're running a business, you're an artist. So
Hmm.
if you're a great painter, even if you're selling cups, you should have them, maybe painted, or you should have something in your copy or whatever that reflects who you are as an artist. Do you, with your own clients, do you find that you have to also reinforce their strengths and tell them to just be themselves or to be vulnerable if they're individuals or, you know?
Yeah. That's such a great question. I think that there's there's like a I don't know, there's like an anti authenticity thing that like front that people put up when they're like at a big company or they're like a business person, and I have to present this attitude of authority and trust, and I've encountered that. Yeah, I've encountered that quite a bit, and I think some of the most powerful marketing does really get at that like authenticity. And I think the problem with a lot of these brands is they don't quite know what their like internal culture is yet. Um, and so without that kind of like core culture that really sums up who they are authentically, it makes it really tough to like communicate to an external audience. So I think like really trying to kind of like figure that out as almost like a first step before you take the plunge into like uh, kind of customer facing marketing is like really figuring out, who do we want to be as a company, and is it authentic, is it like, does it reflect the people who work here, does it reflect our attitude towards our work. So yeah. um,
So I'm going to redirect the question to you. What makes
oh,
you different from all the other marketers on the planet?
oh my god, I'm on the
Aha.
spot. um, I like to I like to approach working with people as just like being friendly. I just like to be friendly. I want to work with other people who are also friendly. Um, so I try to be positive and friendly, and I think ultimately that's what people are looking for when they're looking for a freelancer, or someone to write content or do SEO. Like they want expertise and people who are nice to work with. Um, and so I really try to keep that in mind, even when um, the person I'm working with may not may not have the same attitude. And so I really just I try to stay friendly.
And that's
And
hard. I think what people
yeah.
don't realize is that that's hard because there's a lot of pressure, especially in marketing, to become A, very, very, very highly successful, and B, to just like, just create courses and sell those courses and make all your clients a carbon copy of each other. I think what you're doing is a very personal approach.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It takes yeah, it takes a lot of effort, sometimes, for sure. And just to get back to the question before, I don't know if that's a differentiator. I've met a lot of, since I've launched my own business, I've met a lot of other freelancers. I've networked with a lot of other freelancers, and they're all pretty friendly. There are some people out there who are like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to you because you're a competitor, technically." But I think the majority of people are pretty friendly, and I think, honestly, I think it would hurt their business if they weren't. So it's nice. I think like there's a really good community of freelancers out there. So yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things that really sets you apart is your science background. I think you're one of them in a way that you can relate. Just like for me, I can relate to artists because I've sold my work online. I've done 3 years in
Hmm.
Montreal and rose to the highest ranks possible.
Yeah.
Um, so when you've walked the walk, I think it's easier for clients to relate to you.
Hmm. That's a great point, and yeah, yeah, you're right on. And I think when people hear about my science background, they that definitely does build the trust. It gives you like some immediate credibility, um, and faith that okay, this we're selling a technical product or a technical service, but this guy can figure out how it works and figure out how to kind of message to our audience. Yeah, I think you're right.
Uh, you're an independent worker, which means that you've got to manage your time, you've got to manage your business, you've got to manage your schedule, you've got children, a wife, you have responsibilities. How do you keep from becoming a workaholic?
Oh man, I have not figured it out yet. I think I don't know quite yet. I think there's still that for me. There's a lot of stress over like kind of starting this new business, and much like I did in science, I kind of I turn that stress, that like nervous energy, into productivity. So I just pour all of that into my work. Um, but I think honestly, having kids has it's the best anti-workaholic drug out there, because you can't, like, you just can't focus on work all the time. It's not an option. Um, and so even if, my kids were at home and I was on the computer, they'd be like, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And then they'd start poking on the computer, and I'd be like, "All right, this is not this is a serious burden to focus." And so in a way, sometimes it is a little annoying, but honestly, I think it's a blessing, because I think I would, much like I did in science, I would just burn out after a while. So I think my kids are probably the best anti workaholic thing out there for sure.
Yeah, for people who are listening, what you don't know is that we're actually recording. We're not recording video, but we are on video right now. And I'm looking at Dr. Diner in his kid's bedroom with a with sea creatures on the wall, so you can really tell that it's amusing and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. I think having little people around you must also give you a sense of play.
Hmm. Definitely, it definitely does, and and just you reminded me of the question you asked about authenticity. Like, I think one of the silver linings to this pandemic thing and having everyone work from home is like you get a little snapshot through the webcam into like what their life is like, or what what kind of things kind of fill their life. Whereas, before we'd be in an office and it'd all be very professional. But yes, kids really do promote that play. My son is at the age where he's just like into building things out of Legos, and I used to be so into Legos as a kid, and so it's fun to like sit down and build stuff with him. It's also been fun to like talk about science. He's 3 years old, so he's like just kind of getting a sense of the world now, and so we explained to him, he loves yogurt, and we explained to him that like there's little bacteria in there, scrolling around and making your tummy feel good. And so it's cool to explain that stuff to him. And now every time he eats yogurt, he talks about how they're yummy bacteria. And it's just fun. It's fun to I feel like you really do. It's cliche, but you really do kind of rediscover the world when you have kids for sure.
And what about for your own decompression? What do you do? Like, are you somebody who goes out and surfs? Are you somebody who hikes? Are you do you steal your son's Legos and play with them at 2 a.m. Just to relax?
Uh,
What's your thing to decompress?
Yeah, I you nailed it. It must be California. Like I do like to surf. I try to get out, once or twice a week. It's tough because it takes a lot of time, and time is at an all time low now. But I do like to surf, and then the other thing I like to do is swim. I'm a big swimmer, and that's pretty recent actually. I'd say in the past year I just started swimming a lot. It's refreshing. It really like it's a great kind of like way to clear your head. I'm someone who's like pretty addicted to my phone, and my email, and so like you can't have a phone in the pool or when you're out for a surf. So it's a great way to disconnect for a little bit for sure.
That's very true. That's very true. Um, so if you could work for any company, any cause, what would be kind of some of your dream marketing campaigns that you'd love to work on?
Oh, such that's such a great question. I love I've worked on a couple of like agriculture campaigns, people who make, products and provide services for agricultural biology, which are these are people who are, engineering plants or engineering livestock or other animals, to basically, feed the world. Um, and it's incredible. It's incredible what these people are helping companies do. And I love that stuff, and I think that's a real passion of mine, and I'd love to do more of it. So that the ag bio space I think is a really exciting one, and one I'd love to work more in. The other real passion is a field called synthetic biology, which really kind of takes like an engineering approach to biology. So engineering, microbes or other living organisms to do, new things that, maybe chemical processes can't do. So that's a really exciting field that I've worked a little bit in, but would love to do more work in because and that's also like my research background as well in synthetic biology. So yeah, I dig it.
Very cool. And if a company said to you, "Hey, we really like you. Do you want to come and work for us?" Would you leave, independent work, or would you consider a full-time job, like, down the line?
I w- I wouldn't, honestly. The month since I've launched my business has been stressful, but I wouldn't give it up. It's just I love being able to feel like I can be authentic when I'm on a call with a client. Not then that I don't kind of have to like fit myself into what a company's view of me or my boss's view of me. I can just kind of do my own thing. Um, I don't have to lie about like being able to do video. I can just be like, I don't know how to do that. And
Mhm.
just be honest and authentic. And I really value that. And I also value the flexibility. It allows me to show up for my kids when they need, show up for my wife when they need. It really enables that. So I don't know. Maybe in a year that answer will change, but for now, I really value my independence.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I can actually totally relate.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
listen, Dr. Elie Diner, thanks again for joining me, for being vulnerable enough to just answer the questions as they come. I told you at the beginning of this interview that I didn't have any prepared questions; that I were just going to let curiosity drive this interview, and I'm glad I did it that way because I think we covered a lot of topics that are really important to science communication and to this new kind of, let's call it a niche, science marketing.
Yeah.
So, if people wanted to get a hold of you or learn more about what you do, what's the best place for them to find you online?
So they can go to wordlab.com to check out my business website, spelled WERDLAB.com. And through there, you can shoot me a contact form, and that'll go right to my email, and I can get back to you that way. You can follow me on LinkedIn. It should be pretty easy to find. I think there's only one Elie Diner on LinkedIn. And then you can find me on Twitter as well. It's at Ailey_Diner. That's it. Yeah.
We'll put a link for sure then.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks a lot. I really
Yeah.
appreciate
Great.
you taking your time to answer my questions.
Sure. Great to talk with you, Julie. Thanks.
All right, take care.